Hello? 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 This is the Vancouver
Commercial
Real Estate Podcast.
This podcast is presented by Impact Commercial.
Impact Commercial, John, Alan, the team over there are fantastic. They've all been on the show.
They have, yeah.
Friends of the show.
Great guys.
Wealth of experience. They can help with all your commercial financing needs.
Whether it's owner-occupiers, land development funds, commercial investments, or multifamily, these guys got you covered.
And they recently obtained their CMHC correspondent lender status.
So for all your commercial lending needs, visit them at impactcommercial.ca.
That's impactcommercial.ca.
Xanterra has done it again. Recently named Multifamily Home Builder of the Year by the Home Builders Association of Vancouver and the Canadian Home Builders Association of BC. Xanterra continues to move forward on new projects. And their latest, Butte, a new condo community in West Clayton, is now selling. With construction already underway, buyers can purchase with confidence, knowing that the project is moving forward.
Butte offers 1, 2, and 3 bedroom condos located just 3 blocks to the future SkyTrain, Adam. These condos come with tons of inclusions like gas ranges, air conditioning, and designer selected finishes. Residents will have access to the rooftop patio, fitness center, on-site daycare, co-working space, games room, and tons of outdoor space with 3 playgrounds. Estimated completion is summer 2028.
The best deals are happening now. Visit Xanterra's home store in South Surrey to get all the details or check out the floor plans at buttecondos.ca. That's BUTE condos.ca.
And welcome back to the Vancouver Commercial Real Estate Podcast. I'm Cory Wright, and sitting in with me today, not only as my co-host, but also our guest, Roderick MacKay, team leader of our Vancouver office. Rod, how you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks, Cory. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for taking the time to join us once again. And today, I think we got a great episode. Today, if you're following real estate in any facet, there was an announcement made about a bailout for developers, we'll call it. But we're going to kind of try to dissect that and dive into that to find out exactly what that is and how does that impact anything. But Barad, before we get into that announcement there, can you maybe tell us more about yourself for those maybe who haven't heard you on the past 6-7 episodes you've joined us for?
Yeah, certainly. So born and raised in Vancouver, been here my whole life. Got into commercial real estate just over 8 years ago, and I've been with William Wright Commercial the entire time. It's been a great ride, and I've been fortunate enough to see us grow from 1 office to 6 offices now. And yeah, recently taking on a leadership position, and it's been great. Obviously, seeing quite a few interesting markets between 2018 and now, but it's been a great ride.
Well, Rod, we appreciate you taking the time once again today. So today, on today's episode, we want to dive into this. So there's been an announcement that was made by Mr. Carney with regards to a acquisition of unsold condos throughout BC. Now, we will say this, there's a lot of information that has yet to come out, such as basic information like where are these condos going to be located. But the idea behind the premises is the governments are going to step in. They're going to buy, I believe it was 2,200 condos. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it was 2,200. It was EB and Carney. So it was a BC and federal government partnership that's announced this, and it was part of a larger infrastructure model that they're proposing. And I think when they announced it, they said $3.2 billion. So everyone was thinking that we're going to spend $3.2 billion on these 2,200 vacant condos, which isn't the case. I think it's the actual amount's a lot less than that. It's probably about $300 million of capital, and then the rest. Carney says is going to be through creative financing options. So yes, it's 2,200 vacant condos. Like you said, there's a lot of unknowns. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is speculation because, yeah, we don't know what the government's planning on paying for these condos, which developers will qualify. Are they distressed or just unsold? Are the lenders being paid in full? There's a whole bunch of questions that we're still waiting to find out.
Well, let's maybe dive into it a little bit. So I would think it's been probably, the public has not been very warm to this idea. And I think there's 2 reasons why. I think 1, people view this as a bailout for the developers who have taken on an enormous amount of risk to build these condos. through what we had exceptional immigration growth and population growth, which felt like it came to almost a halt. And there's so much condos in the pipeline that the public probably looks at this as maybe a developer's bailout because of that. But you could even go one step further and say that maybe it's not a developer bailout at all. Maybe it's a bank bailout, because you have to remember too, there's 5 Schedule I banks under the charter, all are government regulated, and there's probably a lot of debt sitting on the books of a lot of these type of lenders who have lent to developers who are waiting to get paid. So could we go one step further and say, if this was even a bailout, that it's not a developer bailout by any stretch, but more of a bank bailout for the debt they're holding on some of these projects?
Well, certainly. I think, to call it a bailout, first of all, if it was sold at market pricing or even just below market pricing, and then the developers are still taking a profit, then certainly, yes, it would be a bailout. But I think this was announced on June 18th, and obviously there was a ton of public backlash, as you mentioned, and they came out a week later on the 25th and basically said that this isn't a bailout. We're not paying close to market for these units. It's going to be a bulk buy. They obviously still didn't come out with any specifics, but they really tried to make it seem to the public like they weren't bailing out the developers. But obviously, this remains to be seen. And then as far as the whole bank angle, whether it's a bank bailout, I suppose, yeah, probably, because they're the ones that are likely going to get paid out first. The sale proceeds will usually go to first repay any construction debt, which obviously they're hanging on to a lot of currently. I mean, there's I think 4,500 unsold pre-sale units currently.
Yeah, about that, depending on what report you read, it sounds like it.
So if the government buys the units, the developer gets the liquidity, but the lender may be the one getting protected. So again, lots of unknowns, but I guess time will tell there.
Now, let's just say here, and let's maybe unpack this a little bit. I think developers get painted with a very unfortunate brush as big bad developers making billions of dollars for unaffordable housing. I think when you actually start peeling back the onion of all of the costs that go into developing property, from CACs to DCCs to CA or ACCs now, they talked about all of these costs on top of fluctuating interest rates, construction costs that feel like they've been rising consistently, land prices for the most part up until maybe this year or last year that's been continuing to rise, and so many things like that that go into actually getting these projects built that contribute to the unaffordability of the projects, if we want to call it that. And developers are building at a fast pace when we're having nothing but immigration coming through. The province is growing rapidly, and it feels like a lot of that almost came to a halt, and now they're left holding the bag. How do the developers view this, or how does the development community view this, considering it kind of feels like, the government left them hanging a little bit when they're kind of build as fast as they can on top of all these large government fees that go into building condos?
Yeah, well, I would agree with you. I think largely a lot of the public sees the developers as only making copious amounts of profits, but they don't necessarily see the risk that goes into it. And there's a large amount of risk. And yeah, there was a large amount of risk that was taken, and now it hasn't paid off, and they're held with the bag, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it. Now, as you mentioned, immigration was skyrocketing. I think one year we had 1.4 million newcomers to the country, which obviously was extremely unsustainable. But so at the same time, the developers were told we need to build because we need more housing. And then the Carney government comes in and completely turns that tap off. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but when you're told to build, but then there's nobody to fill these homes that you built, it makes it obviously a pretty challenging situation. Obviously, part of their risk assessment as developers is, yes, policy and governments can change. But at the same time, I think, yeah, the government probably needs to be held at least a little bit of accountable for maybe what they're trying to make it seem like it was going to be, and then what it ended up being.
Now, do you think, and again, we haven't heard how this is all going to play out. We're just obviously speculating a lot of things. Do you think a lot of pressure from the Schedule I banks was applied to Carney's government with regards to debt on the books that kind of maybe pushed this decision along?
Well, certainly. And that's why if you look at the whole bank bailout angle, it's like, okay, well, who's holding all this debt, right? It's not just who's the developers. I think the developers are getting the headline here, but But realistically, I mean, yeah, who are the guys that are holding all this debt and who stands to benefit? Because once we find that out, it might paint a bit more of a clearer picture about exactly what's happening here.
Now, can we maybe provide a little bit of insight just maybe to where like the development community sits right now? We've seen land prices come off quite a bit over the past year and a half now. It feels like yesterday's 2021 pricing is officially off the books now, and it feels like people who are sitting on land are just trying to dispose of it for what it's worth. There's probably a lot of developers that probably have a fair amount of land on the books that may not need to really absorb any of that land that's getting sold. On top of that, they have projects probably in the pipeline that might have been halted. From the development community, is this a welcomed scenario potentially to have the feds come in and buy these unsold units? Probably, arguably not at a profit.
Well, I would imagine so to a certain degree, but I guess it really depends on who stands to benefit. I mean, there's obviously a lot of people that are going to be left out of this deal, so I'm not sure how it would make them feel as a whole. I guess anecdotally speaking, I've got a couple of land sites currently, and we've reached out to hundreds of developers over the course of the past couple of months. And yeah, the conversations that we're having is that it's pretty grim out there. A lot of people aren't looking to acquire at all. They're more or less looking to survive, like you said, with their existing product. And if they are looking to continue to fill their pipeline so that they can continue to employ their staff, they're being extremely tight with their underwriting. So it's quite challenging to move sites out there, and I think it's not much of a market to sell into. Definitely for condos, but that's even trickling down into townhomes and single family homes as well.
Now, do you think from a federal government standpoint, obviously the immigration, which felt like record setting, literally felt like it came to a halt and numbers were peeled back dramatically. We had unemployment rates in Canada going up. Employers were thrust with new rules on hiring, foreigners and the cost to hire foreigners, all of this stuff in an effort to mitigate probably immigration and probably go back and employ greater Canadians to help with the unemployment rates. I mean, do you think this government brought this forward, I don't want to say admitting guilt, but kind of sort of realizing they might have created a little bit of this problem where they're just yelling at the development community, build, 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 build. And then out of nowhere, foreign buyers are gone, international students are gone. Immigration feels like it's halted. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that they're always looking for housing affordability. So there are definitely some cases for what they're trying to do here. I think the strongest argument is speed. So if they were trying to build affordable housing units, it would take a lot longer. And what EB said was that it is still they'll buy it at below replacement cost. So these are units that are already built or very close to being built, so they can be delivered immediately or in the very near future for below replacement costs. And then you don't have to wait 3-4 years for the project to be completed. So there are some arguments for it. I guess it just really depends on the metrics of it. It's really hard to, look at a deal without actually knowing the numbers. But yeah, I mean, I think, from the government standpoint, they are looking to provide affordable housing, and, whether or not that's the way it will pan out, or if it is to help out the developers and the banks, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
What's next? So let's say this isn't well received. Is there any way that the government pivots on this, especially at the provincial level? Because I remember David Eby was taking a lot of heat at a conference, and I can't quote him word for word, but it was something to the effect of, well, if the people don't like it, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, I think it was like, if people think it sucks, we won't do it, or something like that. Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. I mean, who knows what this government will do? But yeah, I mean, I suppose they could just pull out and pivot completely. What they decide to do instead, I'm really not sure. I think if the other thing is too, they're saying that they want to make housing more affordable. What critics will say is, okay, well, if you want to make housing more affordable, there is a price where these condos will be purchased, right? Like, let's say it's $1,000 a foot today. Maybe it's not $800 a foot. Maybe it's not $600. Would somebody buy it for $550 a foot? Probably. There would be a price. And then if you bring that pricing down, then it would adjust the overall market, and there would be some kind of reset, which in turn would make it more affordable for people to get into the housing market. I think with what they were trying to do here is more of a rent to own model, where people might not have a down payment to put towards the property. So I suppose that wouldn't necessarily help out the folks that they're looking to benefit with this plan. But I think if you look at the overall market and let it determine itself. Eventually, these condos would sell, certainly at a loss, but people that have been waiting for condos to become affordable might benefit from it, which with this bailout, they probably won't.
Now, do we know yet, with regards to this bailout, do we know yet if this is going to be like affordable housing sold to people, or is this going to be affordable housing for rent? I think either way, if you're a condo buyer and you bought in a building and all of a sudden the government buys a place not too far from your unit at dramatically less than what you paid, that's going to obviously impact the price that you bought the condo for. Or to go one step further, if you did pay a pretty penny for a condo and all of a sudden you have affordable renters now in a building, that I think also would impact the value of that condo. Is there any insight yet on kind of which way the government's going with regards to which condos they're purchasing or not purchasing?
Well, I think it was going to be they would purchase them and then they would give somewhat of a rent to own model. Now, I'm not 100% sure how that would work, or if they're looking to do that with some of the units or all of the units. I think, like you mentioned, yeah, no matter how you slice this, you're going to ruffle some feathers. Whether you leave the market the way it is, then some of the developers that stood to benefit and the lenders, they're going to be up in arms. But yeah, the way that you put it, if I bought a condo for $1,200 a foot and now the government's buying something for $750 a foot and then letting somebody that is going to pay even less than that lives right next to me and has the same condo with the same view, that would be challenging for them to take as well. But yeah, again, I think no matter which way you do it, you can't make everyone happy.
So one thing I always like to do when we get professionals like yourself on the podcast is also pick your brain on what you're seeing. Obviously, you're on the front lines of sales right now and sales and leasing for that matter. And
not of condos specifically.
Not of condos specifically, but commercial real estate. How is the market right now? Because you do hear a mixed bag out there where some people say it's really busy and other people say it's dead. What are you seeing on your side?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to sort of give an answer of just broadly looking at the entire market. We obviously deal in a lot of different asset classes. We've got office, we've got retail, we've got industrial, and then there's different areas that we work in, and certain areas are performing extremely well where you can list a property and it'll be scooped up in a couple of weeks, and then there's other areas where it could sit for a year, maybe two. Really, a lot of it comes down to is pricing things appropriately. There is a market price sort of at any time, even in more challenging markets. And I think we've, over the past couple of years, we've started to see vendors and landlords become a bit more realistic in their pricing, especially on the sell side. Now that you're competing against people that need to sell, whether it's forced through the courts or you need to liquidate that money and put it elsewhere just because the economy is not doing so well. But people that just want to sell, they're competing against those that need to. So we are seeing a bit of an adjustment in pricing in some markets, and it's taken a few years to get there. But we are seeing some more realistic pricing, which is good because we're seeing a lot more transactions come through. I think overall, as a whole, the economy is not great. We're in a recession now, and I think a lot of that was propped up with immigration. Now that that's gone, we are in, as they said, a technical recession. So certainly when you speak to tenants, they'll definitely use that to try to negotiate and get better deals. Just talking about how their business isn't as good. Sometimes you look at people's financials and it doesn't reflect that. Some businesses are doing extremely well. So it's hard to paint it with a broad brush over the whole market. Some areas are performing a lot better than others.
Is there an area of opportunity right now, whether that be an asset class or a market that you feel might be?
Well, I'm gonna flip that right around to you. What do you think, Cory?
That's a great question. Well, I'm a big believer in retail still, and I think if you can find retail in the right markets, secondary markets or Fraser Valley markets, I think is like if you can buy it right now at a cap rate that's arguably inflated, that will have cap compression in the future, I think you can do very well, especially if you have upside on the rent, so you're really well positioned. But all of that said, I think location is more important now than ever, because there is a lot of stuff that has been arguably in a decent area, but maybe not the best location, that I feel has sat for quite a while now. And I think it's just buyers are just being that much more selective with it. If it's good product and it's well priced and well located, things are moving. From a transaction standpoint, William Wright, from our brokerage standpoint, has seen a huge lift in transactions over last year. Doesn't mean pricing is going up anytime soon. It just means that transactions are finally coming through where maybe buyers' expectations are finally lining up with vendors' expectations. Same with tenant and landlords. I think landlords are still having to put in a decent amount of inducements to kind of make things work. I don't think that things are flying off the shelf that they were a couple of years ago, but transactions as a whole is seeing a huge uptick in 2026 versus 2025.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I guess just to go back when you were asking how the market is, it's all over the place. And it depends on the asset class. It depends on how the property is improved. To give you an example, we just sold a 4,200 square foot retail space for double the assessed value. Our client purchased it for about $3.1 million 5 years ago. And yeah, we're closing on it in August for $6.5 million. So doubled his investment in 5 years in a time period where almost everybody is losing money because that was purchased at a time when interest rates were next to zero. So that was double the assessed value. And then we just sold an office unit in downtown Vancouver recently for half of its assessed value, an older unit that had a lot of distressed units in the building. But we went to court and sold for about half its assessed value. So another thing I've been hearing a lot more about is buyers talking about the property's assessment, which really just should not be used as a method to value a property. But for some reason in the last year or two, we hear more and more people using the BC assessment as a metric, probably because they're coming down. So from a buyer's standpoint, it helps their case, but it really is not a very good method of valuation.
So if I'm hearing you correctly and I'm offering on a property, I want to use the assessed value, although it has no correlation. I'm going to argue the assessed value is what it is. But on the sell side, I need to educate the buyer and the buyer's agent that this has absolutely nothing to do with it. Because one thing I think a lot of people don't realize is after a property does transact, and maybe it's the first in an area to transact at a higher value because maybe there's new rental rates or something to that effect, BC Assessment sends out letters asking you for information on why this transacted so high, because they want to use that information to reassess everything in the area potentially. And I think for the longest time period, a lot of properties have been assessed or valued at the highest and best use, which a lot of cases is development land. When that development potential is now gone, you're starting to see the numbers come down quite a bit, I think, in the value side of it. And I think when you ask me, is there a good thing to buy? I mean, if you were to go buy a well-positioned asset that had development potential, before you were probably buying a development site with holding income, meaning you're paying a premium dollar for the property because you're buying it on development spec, but it does have some level of financial income to actually offset some of your debt while holding it. Now, they're not being marketed as development sites with holding income. They're now being marketed as investment properties with development potential, which means you're now buying them based on income on a cap rate basis versus buying them with development potential in the medium to long term if the market transacts differently and changes. But you're being able to pick up, arguably, in quotations, development land with greater holding income. That way, if it never materializes as development land, you haven't overpaid for the asset. And that's one thing I think we talk about development land we see right now being sold at rock bottom prices. Because a lot of people bought maybe a small retail plaza at a 2.5 cap rate because they bought it on development spec. But now, because that development spec is sort of all but gone, they're now selling it on a 5 cap rate or a 4 cap rate based on income, which in a lot of cases could be half the price they bought it for. And I don't want to say they bought wrong. They just bought on a different metric based on those market conditions. So if you look at it now that I can potentially buy that same property that may have arguably medium to long-term development potential to it, but now at a 5 cap rate, and I'm getting paid for my risk, that's a different story. And I think those opportunities, if you dig deep into them and you do have a medium to long-term outline or outlook on it, I think you'll find some good value in today's market that eventually development will come back. And I think one thing we all forget is everything that's not getting built yesterday and today and tomorrow is really going to impact us 3 to 5 years down the line because all of these products aren't getting delivered. And what will most likely happen is, we'll go through our cycle and all of a sudden immigration numbers will pick up, foreign investors will be allowed back in, and you're going to start to see things ramp up again. And then everyone's yelling about a housing crisis, but everything that's not getting built today is going to lead into that housing crisis you're going to hear about 3 to 5 years down the road. So all of that, assuming comes to reality, then the chance to buy a property on income right now that has development potential in the future you could find maybe you're getting a pretty good buy. I'm not saying development prices are going to surpass income prices, but the opportunity may present itself if the development community and the immigration and all of that stuff kind of kicks into what we saw over the past couple of years.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that you say all that. I mean, I think, yeah, maybe that's more for true commercial properties, retail plazas that you were mentioning. I know as a team we've looked at some sites, and yeah, we're trying to put together a valuation, and it's tough to make the numbers work. There's been a couple traditionally, if you're assembling a few single family residential homes, you're adding value because you have a site where now you can build at scale and you can develop into a high rise potentially. But we're looking at these sites now and thinking, is this a more viable site as single family homes as opposed to the assembled site? So it's a very strange market that we're in, that I haven't seen anything like it since I've started my career in 2018, and it's certainly a challenging one.
Well, I think one thing too we all saw on the brokerage side is you'd be doing land assemblies or strata windups for that matter, where these landowners and homeowners were getting 20, 30, sometimes 40, 50% premium for their property if they sold collectively based on development prices. And because those numbers have come down so much over the past couple of years, to your point, a lot of these houses or condos might be worth more as a single family dwelling or a strata lot than they are as a collective development site. And I think time will tell how that changes with time, but you are unfortunately having a lot of conversations telling people that it's not worth what it once was to sell as a collective group for a premium unless the market on the development world kind of starts to pick back up and head in the right direction.
Now, it feels like on our side of the business and commercial, I mean, I wouldn't say, it doesn't feel like pricing's dropping off a cliff or anything like that. I mean, there's still a decent amount of capital out there that's looking for good investment properties. They just, they're being a little bit more cautious, but we are seeing a lot of transactions come through. And I'd say for the most part, aside for some specific areas, we're not really seeing pricing fall off a ledge. In some places, they're actually continuing to rise, for well-located retail, for instance. But do you get the sense with these condos that we just need it? It's going to be a new market. Like there's going to have to be some kind of reset, because it just doesn't seem like, even with this bailout, like this is, if we're calling it a bailout, it's 2,200 condos. I mean, if you look across the entire country, I know they're obviously having their fair share of problems, probably even more so than us in the GTA. I don't know. Has there been any discussion about doing something similar there?
Well, I think you've seen bulk condo sales back east a lot more than you've seen out here in BC. And I think, there's been some marketed out here in BC. The last one I can kind of try to remember, and again, I could be off here, was when the Scalena group bought all of the remaining condos in Athletes Village after the Olympics and the city of Vancouver was holding the debt. Is they bought, I want to say it was 80 or 88 condos, I could be off. And then they took over the selling of the condos. They obviously bought them at a bulk discount and then later sold those condos through Rennie over however long it takes to sell them. So I don't really know what this whole thing looks like, to be completely honest with you. But back east, there's been a lot more of this bulk condo sales and conversation point than we have out here, mainly because I think Toronto was even more overbuilt than what Vancouver currently is, or Greater Vancouver and BC is. One thing to remember out here is we have so many geographical challenges in so many markets. Like Vancouver, you've got mountains and oceans, and you go to Kelowna, you got lakes and mountains, and there's all these markets where people typically have wanted to buy. All of them are surrounded by geographical challenges, far more out west than there is out east. And another challenge we have is political, is getting anything built. Things take a far longer time to build out here. So even as things ramp up and go, things don't really move out, don't really move nearly as fast as I think everyone wants to see them move.
But yeah, and part of what you mentioned there, so yeah, part of the announcement was, I think part of the $3.2 billion that they've allocated is going to be to alleviate the development cost charges, which we've been talking about forever. CACs, DCCs, all these charges that make up almost the bulk of the home costs when you add up everything. That's been making it really hard to make all of these condos and homes affordable with all the taxes and charges that are on top of everything. Now they're looking to provide some relief, but it really feels like it's too little too late on that front. Well, we've been talking about this for years, saying that something needs to be done.
Well, I think even from the development community, that's one thing they've always been screaming at. It's just how many dollars go into the coffers of municipalities. And when these things are getting built, and depending on who you talk to, the number I think varies from 15, 20% to as much as 30% of every dollar spent somehow finds its way into a government coffer. And when you're looking at those type of numbers, let's say hypothetically it's 30% on $1,000 a foot, $300 a foot is going into a city coffer. And when we had Brad on from West Group before, and I thought he had a great idea. It'll never come to fruition, I think, because of transparency. The government doesn't want you to see what you're paying for. But even why don't you take the DCCs and the CAC costs and all that stuff and defer them and make them a closing cost for the buyer on their SOA?
Yeah.
You're paying the exact same, but that allows the developer to not have to pay a lot of those costs up front to get the project moving, and then of which they're paying interest on a lot of that money. So the cost of the condo is even going up even further. That why not just push it all to the purchaser, because you're paying it one way or the other. The reason why that probably will never happen, because they don't want anyone to see how outrageous these costs are. And I mean, that's a great solution, but I just don't think it's anything that will see the light of day because of that.
Yeah, that's true. There would probably be a lot more public backlash if you did see the actual percentage on every time you're looking at the statement of adjustments. You're like, hold on, I thought my condo was $800,000. No, it's $1.1 million.
Yeah.
Wait, why is that? And then if you could really see it in front of you, as opposed to just listening to people talk on a podcast about it, it might actually make more of a meaningful difference.
Well, this might be something that people can draw a conclusion with. Is we did a project in a city, I won't name names, that when the property was first acquired, the DCCs and CACs for the project was estimated about 1.8 million and change. Fast forward probably 24 months, 36 months, when they actually were applying for their development permit, the DCCs and ACs had gone up so much, it gone from 1.8 million to over $3.4 million on the one project. These costs all get passed on to consumers. And with local municipalities, there's no governance over these numbers. And a lot of municipalities and cities have literally lived high on the hog because of development costs that were coming into the city, whether that DCCs or CACs or ACCs. Now, all that money coming into the city gave them a lot of money to do a lot of things. And when the development world has slowed down and that windfall has stopped, they're now looking at reassessing some of these costs and driving them higher to make up for operating costs of the city. Well, that's just going to further push development down the road, because developers at the previous numbers were hesitant to take risks. Now the fact these costs have gone up that much more is even more reason for them not to take the risk, and going to create more housing issues long term.
Yeah, I mean, and you talk to a lot of them, and it sounds like a lot of them are just doing more and more business in the States because they don't have all these fees and the red tape that you see here, and it just makes more sense to do business there, even though they'd love to do it here because this is their home. It seems like, capital's fleeing the country, developers are. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. We obviously, started this podcast with the idea of it. Is it a developer bailout? Is it a bank bailout? But I think at this point, we really don't know the specifics too much at all. So we'll have to wait, and time will tell, and we'll see how this all plays out.
Well, Rod, I appreciate the time today to kind of provide some light, or at least some opinions on this bailout, we'll call it, potentially what's coming forward here and how it's been received by the public there. But before we let you go, we have our 6-pack of lighthearted questions. You got a few more minutes just to hang out with us here?
Sure.
All right, Rod, first one up. It's summertime here. We're recording this. It's the first week of July. The sun's finally out. If you find the time this year, where are you going on vacation?
Oh, vacation. Well, not honestly. I usually stay in the province during the summer. It's too nice here to leave. I find that I'll take my flights generally in the winter time to get away somewhere warm. If it's somewhere in the province, so it's probably either a Soyuz or Sunshine Coast, something simple like that.
Summertime's here. Working out, healthy living, I think tends to creep into everyone's mindset this year. You're obviously on the threshold of that, running marathons, doing all that stuff. Anything that you have purchased for under $1,500 that's made a positive impact on your life as of late that you can share with us? Does not have to be something physical. Could be a membership or anything like that.
It wasn't super recently, but I think my Garmin purchase was probably one of the best things for me. You can track your sleep, track your steps, your runs, everything like that. It'll track your heart rate variability. So it'll tell you what kind of effect a couple beers after work will have on your sleep, which which is more than you think. So yeah, I think the Garmin would be the one I would choose for that.
If I were to dig into your music playlist right now, what songs are you binging to?
Oh boy. Honestly, it's usually just stuff. I usually just get Spotify to choose for me now. It's like I get them to throw on a running playlist or a workout playlist. So I don't even have much of a say in the matter now. I'd have to get back to you on that. Usually probably some it's either upbeat electronic music, or I'll tell you what, Corey, I do have this Creed and Nickelback playlist. That's phenomenal.
Well, the minute you put the word Nickelback in, you go high up on my list. And as sad as that sounds, what TV show or movie you've been watching this summer?
What have we been watching? Jeez, I don't know. The fallback's always The Office. If we've got nothing to put on, it's The Office is always the one that's kind of constantly replaying itself. But lately, it's been FIFA, watching the World Cup.
Yeah, I feel like it's taken over at least Canada by storm here. A lot of people that weren't watching are watching. I even know my boys that aren't really into soccer. They're watching the Mexican game last night. They're watching the Brazil game last night. So it feels like it's taken it by storm right now, which is unfortunate they couldn't move on to the quarterfinals. But I think obviously getting to the round of 16 is pretty spectacular for Canada soccer. And
well, I think we've got the Spain-Portugal game at noon. I think you're going to find probably about a dozen of our brokers watching in the boardroom. So maybe after the tournament's done, productivity will go up. I don't know. We'll see.
A book recommendation for our listeners, or an Audible?
Yeah, good question. I guess I always kind of fall back to Atomic Habits. I usually try to read that sort of once a year by James Clear. That's a classic. I think not probably most people have read it, but if you haven't, you certainly should.
It's July. It's not hockey season yet, but in Vancouver, we're all hockey fanatics. Are the Canucks going to make the playoffs in 2027?
Oh, geez. That's a tough one. I'm just going to say yes, because I like to be optimistic, but honestly, I haven't been paying too much attention to make enough of a proper analysis, but I'd like to hope that they will. But after last season and then us getting shafted in the draft lottery once again, so that was a little demoralizing, I got to say. I honestly, I think the last time I watched the draft lottery was back when Matthews was drafted, I think we went down a couple spots then too, and the Leafs jumped up a bunch. So to see that happen again, it was tough to watch. So
well, I think we can't draw any conclusions just yet on the new of Canucks with the Sundins and Johnson, all that stuff, because it's yet to be determined. But based on our previous drafting history, even if we got first overall, we would have probably messed it up some way, somehow. So maybe falling to third doesn't allow us to mess it up as bad as we probably could have messed it up if we got the first place guy.
That's good. Well, we got Malhotra and Malhotra. So, you know what? That's exciting. I always liked Malhotra. So it'd be an exciting season.
All right, Rod, for all of those people who want to find out more about what you're doing at William Wright Commercial in Vancouver, market updates, all that stuff, how can our listeners find out more about you?
Yeah, definitely. There are lots of information on our properties and market updates, what we're doing on williamwright.ca. You can find all of our agents' info there under the agent section, including mine. So williamwright.ca is the best resource. You can also follow us along on Instagram as well, William Wright Vancouver. And yeah.
Well, Rod, thank you once again for taking the time to hang out with us here, provide some insight and some opinions on this stuff. And for all those listeners, we'll be back next week with another great episode. Thanks, Rod.
Thanks, Wright.
Subscribe today.